Hey guys, it's Misty from the Book Rat, and I'm back with the final Fairy Tale Fortnight vlog. I'm sorry I couldn't do more on the vlog front for you guys, but it's been a hectic 2 weeks. But in case you missed them, I reviewed Godmother and Entwined. You can check those out there. And of course, you can click at any time to hop over to Fairy Tale Fortnight and check out all of the goodies we've got going on over there, enter all the giveaways, and just join in on the fairy tale conversation. For the last vlog, I was going to do one more review, and it was a choice between doing a full-length or short story reviews, but I decided no, that's not quite what I wanted to do. Instead, I would like to talk to you about some of my favorite really weird fairy tales. There are lots of really weird tales, and this is just barely scratching the surface, but when I think of strange tales, these are among the first to pop to mind. Undeniably, the first tale that comes to mind when I think of strange, underknown tales is definitely The Rose Elf by Hans Christian Andersen. Basically, in the story, there are two young lovers, and the girl has an older brother who is very controlling and doesn't like her beau, her boyfriend, so he decides he's gonna have him killed. So one night, after this very tender meeting between the two young lovers, the boy is alone out in the woods, and he's holding a rose that the girl had given him, and he's kissing it and thinking of his love, and the brother and some henchmen kill him, beat him up, stab him to death, decapitate him, and bury him. In the midst of all this, there's a little tiny rose elf who has witnessed the entire thing, so he sort of attaches himself to the brother and follows him home, and whispers in the girl's ear while she's sleeping what has happened. When she wakes up, she steals away, goes to the woods where the newly disturbed ground is, and digs up her lover's body. She mourns him, of course, and wishes that he could be buried properly. As she can't carry his entire body, she decides that she's going to keep his head, and she takes her lover's head home with her, where she proceeds to put it in a pot and plant jasmine over it. So every day she waters the jasmine with her tears, and she's just kind of wasting away. The rose elf sees all of this going on, and he mourns her. So she dies, and the rose elf wants vengeance. After she dies, the brother keeps the jasmine and he takes it into his room. So the rose elf steals into the room and whispers to the other little rose elves that are on another plant in the room, because apparently everyone keeps lots of potted plants in the room, the story of what has happened. And these rose elves already know, and they don't really seem to care. And the rose elf is disgusted. So he goes out and decides to tell his story to the honeybees, and the queen is livid. So they vow that in the morning they are going to sting him. They're going to kill the brother and get their vengeance. When they make it back to the house and burst through the window, the brother has already died. The townspeople are kind of gathered around and think that he must have been mourning his sister so much that he died from grief. What had really happened was the little elves that lived in the jasmine that the girl watered every night with her tears snuck out in the middle of the night and stabbed him with poison-tipped spears. So in a way they've gotten their vengeance, but the rose elf is not happy with that because the townsmen don't know that he's guilty of anything. So the bees swarm the jasmine pot, and one of the townsmen, in his haste to get the jasmine out of there before anyone is stung, picks up the pot to get stung himself and drops it. It proceeds to crack open and spill out the bleached skull of the young lover, and the townspeople put it together. How they immediately know that it must be the head of the lover and that the girl was the one that planted it in the pot and whatever, I don't know. You just have to leave that to fairy tale magic. But essentially, that is the story. And the moral may be the best part. So this is after the flower pot fell and broke to pieces. Then they, the townspeople, saw the whitened skull, and they knew that the dead man lying on the bed was a murderer. The queen bee hummed in the air and sang about the vengeance of the flowers to the rose elf, and that behind each smallest leaf lurks a being who can discover and revenge every evil deed. So the moral of this very bizarre story is clearly, if you do wrong, even if I don't see it as your parent or your lawmaker or whatever, the little beings in the flowers are going to come out at night and stab you to death with poison-tipped spears. Hans Christian Andersen, everybody. The second story is one called Donkey Skin, and it comes from Charles Perrault's Fairy Tales. There are many variants of this tale, and some of them are even stranger. Bear skin might be even weirder than this one, but Donkey Skin was the first one I came upon, so it's always the one I tend to think of. Basically, there is a king whose queen has died, and in his grief and madness, he begins looking at his daughter, who looks very much like the queen, and thinking that it is his young bride, and he wants to marry her, his own daughter. So of course the daughter is horrified and can't figure a way out of it, so she goes to her fairy godmother 3 different times, and each time the fairy godmother tells her to ask for this impossible task, which is to make a dress first that looks like the sky, then that looks like the moon, and then one that shines like the sun. The king does this each time because he really wants to sleep with his daughter. Finally, when none of that works, the fairy godmother says, ask him for the skin of the donkey that lives in the stables, and you can use that to disguise yourself and get away. Which is what the princess does, and she escapes the castle. She goes to work on a farm in a neighboring kingdom, where she's kind of the lowest of the low, and she's really ugly, and she makes herself dirty and all that. But every Sunday she goes into her room, because she has a private room as the lowest servant, strips down, washes herself up, and puts on one of the beautiful dresses. The bored prince, who is wandering around peeking through the keyholes in the servants' quarter, stumbles upon the princess on a Sunday in one of her beautiful dresses, and he becomes obsessed. He requests that Donkey Skin, the girl, make him a cake with her own hands. So she makes a cake, but in it either falls or is placed a ring that she was wearing that is very dainty, apparently. The prince sees it and says that he will marry whichever woman the ring fits, much like Cinderella with the shoe. So of course women come from all around, and they're trying to get this ring to fit them. And why it would be such a hard thing for this ring to fit, much like Cinderella with the shoe. Apparently this ring is too small for everyone, to the point that they are shaving skin off of their fingers, dissolving the skin off of their fingers, completely removing the skin from their fingers, trying to make their finger thinner so they can wear this ring. First of all, because that won't be noticeable when you come with a completely mutilated hand and ask to have the ring put on. So of course the ring doesn't fit anyone, and Donkey Skin is the last one left standing in the room, and the prince calls for her to be brought over, and the ring fits. Ta-da! He says he will marry her, and she asks if she can go and clean herself up first, which everyone laughs at, but when she comes back, she's dressed in one of the gorgeous gowns, and everyone is very happy that they're going to have an actual princess. They plan a big wedding and invite all of the neighboring kingdoms, at which point her father shows up, miraculously cured of his madness, begs her forgiveness, and blesses the wedding. The moral of this story being, it is not hard to see that the moral of this tale is that it's better to undergo the greatest hardships rather than to fail in one's duty, that virtue may sometimes seem ill-fated, but will always triumph in the end. So if your father tries to marry you, go all out, hiding in a donkey skin until you can find the next king, and he'll take you on. Charles Perrault, everybody. The last one comes from Grimm's, of course, and there are tons and tons and tons of weird tales in all of these, but especially Grimm's. This is one of the most bizarre, and there is a moral in here, but why you would tell it in this way, I'm not entirely sure. It is very, very short, and I'm just going to read it to you because this one needs to be experienced in full. So I give you The Mouse, the Bird, and the Sausage. Once on a time, a mouse and a bird and a sausage lived and kept house together in perfect peace among themselves and in great prosperity. It was the bird's business to fly to the forest every day and bring back the wood. The mouse had to draw the water, make the fire, and set the table, and the sausage had to do the cooking. Nobody is content in this world. Much will have more. One day the bird met another bird on the way, and told him of his excellent condition in life. But the other bird called him a poor simpleton to do so much work, while the 2 others led easy lives at home. When the mouse had made up her fire and drawn water, she went to rest in her little room until it was time to lay the cloth. The sausage stayed by the saucepan, looked to it that the victuals were well cooked, and just before dinner time he stirred the broth or the stew 3 or 4 times well round himself, so as to enrich and season and flavor it. He hopped in the stew and stirred it around. Then the bird used to come home and lay down his load, and they sat down to table, and after a good meal they would go to bed and sleep their fill till the next morning. It really was a most satisfactory life. But the bird came to the resolution next day never again to fetch wood. He had, he said, been their slave long enough, Now they must change about and make a new arrangement. So in spite of all the mouse and sausage could say, the bird was determined to have his own way. So they drew lots to settle it, and it fell so that the sausage was to fetch wood, the mouse was to cook, and the bird was to draw water. Now see what happened. The sausage went away after the wood, the bird made up the fire, and the mouse put on the pot, and they waited until the sausage should come home, bringing the wood for the next day. But the sausage was absent so long that they thought something must have happened to him, and the bird went part of the way to see if he could see anything of him. Not far off he met with a dog on the road, who, looking upon the sausage as lawful prey, had picked him up and made an end of him. The bird then lodged a complaint against the dog as an open and flagrant robber, but it was all no good, as the dog declared that he had found forged letters upon the sausage, so that he deserved to lose his life. The sausage was carrying forged documents, so the dog ate him. The bird then very sadly took up the wood and carried it home himself, and related to the mouse all he had seen and heard. They were both very troubled, but determined to look on the bright side of things and still remain together. And so the bird laid the cloth, and the mouse prepared the food, and finally got into the pot, as the sausage used to do, to stir and flavor the broth. But then she had to part with fur and skin, and lastly with life. And when the bird came to dish up the dinner, there was no cook to be seen, and he turned over the heap of wood and looked, but the cook never appeared again. By accident the wood caught fire, and the bird hastened to fetch water to put it out, but he let fall the bucket in the well, and himself after it, and as he could not get out again, he was obliged to be drowned. The end. The Grimms, everybody. So, take from that what you will. Good morals to be learned across the board, I'm sure. Definitely let me know what your favorite really weird tales are in the comments, and if you've heard of these ones, definitely want your take. If you haven't heard of them, tell me what you think, please, because I know they are interesting. Next Disney movie, any of them? Little Pixar sausage being eaten by a dog for carrying forged documents. So that is all for this video and for Fairy Tale Fortnight. Happy reading!